Well, good morning, Rev Church. Hey, if you don't know, we stream all of our services live on Facebook, and something we like to do at Youth Group is we like to let everybody know who's watching online just how grateful and excited we are to be at church this morning. So on the count of three, I want you guys to greet everybody who's watching online with a loud response, okay? Lose your mind for a couple seconds. 1, 2, 3, come on. Yes. That's an acceptable amount of energy, okay? I can work with that. That's also a good way to kind of gauge the energy. That's good for first service, too. Hey, if you're new here or if you're visiting, first of all, we're so glad you're here. We're glad you're worshiping with us this morning. But I tell you, I'm not the lead pastor. I'm not Pastor Josh Cardwell. But you're not missing much, I promise. Josh is only smarter, better looking, and a better preacher than me. But that is it, okay? That's it. That's all you're missing. Just kidding. But I am humbled and honored to have the opportunity to be up here. I'm really excited to talk about something that I'm just so passionate about. And speaking of, if you don't know me, my name is Brandon. I'm the student director here, and I've been with Rev for about a year now, and I got to say it's been one of the most exciting years of my life and one of the most rewarding years of my life. And I know when people say they're living the dream, like you ask somebody, hey, how you doing? They're living the dream. They're saying it sarcastically, but for me, I really am living my dream. I mean, I am passionate. I'm passionate about leading students into a life-changing and a life-giving relationship with Jesus. I believe that is the most important thing that I can do with my life personally. And maybe I'm biased, and this is what we're going to talk about this morning. Maybe I'm biased, but I think that is the most important thing that all of us can do with our life as the church, is pouring into the next generation and creating church leaders out of the next generation, creating culture changers out of the next generation, creating world changers out of the next generation. I think that's what we're called to do. Creating church leaders out of the next generation is so important, and God does this all throughout the Bible. We'll see later this morning. So that's what we do at RevStudents. That's our goal. We create leaders and we create world changers. And like I said, that's not something that I think we all should do. I think it's something that we all are called to do. I want to share with you some of the awesome things that have happened in our student ministry real quick before we go any further. It's a really exciting time to be a part of Revolution Students. Some cool things that have happened. Obviously, I probably should have the numbers offhand of the exact amount of people that have accepted Christ and the exact amount of people who've been baptized and that kind of thing. I don't have those numbers, but I will tell you that I have seen lives are being changed in our student ministry. They really are. It's incredible. It's incredible. That's right. I've seen students make the decision to accept Christ and not just say some prayer and go on living their life, but I've seen students make the decision to accept Christ and truly start following Jesus, truly start adjusting their lives to it, and it's amazing. And then they make the public profession of their faith with baptism, and that's so cool. And then one of the coolest things I've seen this about 3 times, it's when a student brings a friend, like an unchurched friend, to youth group, and that friend hears about Jesus and is introduced to Jesus and falls in love with Jesus and starts following Jesus. And then that friend brings their family to church. They bring their parents and their siblings and their aunts and uncles to Revolution Church on Sunday mornings, as the youth group is actually growing the church. And then what will happen is that student will want to make the public profession of faith by baptism. And then the original student that brought that student baptizes that student. It's so cool. It's so cool. Awesome things. And I wish I could say that I have anything to do with it, but I am not kidding y'all when I say I have nothing to do with it. I'm not qualified at all to be leading the students. It is all God, and it's all God using an incredible team of leaders that He's provided that sacrifice so much of their time and energy and are there every Wednesday night pouring into your students and are so dedicated and so passionate and so loyal about leading your students into a life-changing and life-giving relationship with Jesus Christ. Let's give it up for every leader that volunteers. Yes. Incredible things are happening. Really cool time to be a part of our student ministry, be a part of Revolution Church in general, but definitely our student ministry. So we're doing a huge event called Chosen Youth. Maybe you've heard about it. We've been talking about it for a while, and this is an event for our students. It's actually this weekend is when it starts, and this sermon, this message is the first of many messages that the students are going to hear throughout this week, and especially this weekend. They're going to hear a lot over the course of this week, and the sole purpose of this event, the sole purpose of all these messages messages is to inform students, to inform teenagers that they are chosen by God to do incredible, mind-blowing, world-changing things with their life right now. That's the sole purpose of this event. That's what we hope will happen. We want them to know they are chosen by God to do awesome things. And we see God do this all throughout Scripture. It's a reoccurring theme all throughout the Bible. We see God choose teenagers, choose young people, choose the younger generation to accomplish his will in just crazy, crazy ways. If you know your Bible, you can probably think of a few, but just a few in particular. I know God did this with young teenagers like Daniel, as in Daniel in the lion's den. We see God do that with teenagers like David, as in David and Goliath. We see Jesus do that with his disciples. His 12 disciples were probably younger. They're probably young guys, some of them maybe even young teenagers. He chose 12 young people to be his followers, to build his church. He entrusted his church to them and to change the course of history forever. He chose 12 young people to do that. And we're going to talk about Daniel and David and the disciples this weekend with the students. But the Apostle Paul also did that. He did that with a young teenager named Timothy. He chose this guy named Timothy to pastor a church in one of the most harsh and secular environments imaginable, and that's who we're going to talk about this morning a little later. And it's an unfortunate fact. It's an unfortunate fact that a lot of Christians, a lot of church leaders have completely missed this biblical truth. A lot of Christians and church leaders have made church an environment where only older folks are taken seriously. It's like they've put some sort of age requirement on leadership. And I truly believe that that's wrong. I truly believe that's unbiblical, and I think that's something that we have to stop doing if we want to do what Jesus told us to do, and that is to make disciples of all people from all nations, and guess what that includes? All ages too. A lot of church leaders have missed the importance in pouring into youth, and I think as a result of that, our church is in decline, right? We can all probably agree that we've seen a decline in the Church of Jesus Christ lately, and I think that has a lot to do with a lack of pouring into the coming up generation, right? I think if you really want to start seeing revival, we always talk about revival. We want to see revival in Crossville. We want to see revival in Cumberland County. We want to see revival in Tennessee. We want to see revival in America. We want to see revival in the world. Revival. Well, I think the key to that, I think if we really want to start seeing revival, then we need to start building up our next generation. I think if you're a student in here, if you're a teenager in here, if you're a younger generation, I'm telling you, you are the key to reviving this country. You are the key to reviving this world. You are the key. Something we always say at Revolution Students is we start now. We start now. In fact, we just got T-shirts made that say "We start now." So if you see a student wearing that T-shirt, you'll know what it means after this. But what that means is we always tell our students we don't wait to be leaders. We don't wait to be Jesus followers. We don't wait to be culture changers. We don't wait to be world changers. We start now. We start right now. And that means we start right where we are right now. That includes our schools. That includes our homes. That includes our Facebook pages. For the teenagers who still have Facebook, for those of y'all that don't know, Facebook isn't cool anymore. The teenagers will keep you humble and tell you how old you're getting. That includes our Instagram pages, though. That includes our Snapchats. That includes our social lives. That includes our friendships. We start making a difference for Jesus. RevStudents, we start making a difference for Jesus right now, right where we are. Maybe in the future, God will send you to a third world country, or maybe he'll send you to another state to be a pastor, whatever. Maybe he'll do something crazy, but he's got you where you are right now for a reason. So work with what you got. Start right now, right where you are. So we start right where we are right now. And this message, by the way, doesn't just apply to teenagers. So don't tune this out if you're not a teenager in this room. This applies to you too. In fact, everything we talk about today is going to apply to you. If you've never made the decision to follow Jesus, or if you've never given Jesus control of your life, if you've never allowed him to do just awesome culture-changing things through you, then this applies to you too. In fact, you'll see that everything we talk about this morning that's about teenagers applies to adults too. It applies to you. We just want the teenagers, we want them to see that they're called to start doing these things right now. We want them to see that they have an incredible opportunity in front of them right now to start following God young. They have an opportunity to let God change them and work through them right now. They have an opportunity to live basically a full life following God and experiencing the awesome things that God has in store for them. They have a whole life to experience that. A lot of us miss that opportunity. A lot of us missed that opportunity when we were a teenager, if we're being honest. I definitely did. It wasn't until I was about 20 years old, 21 years old, that I really got what it meant to follow Jesus. But even if you're like me and you let that opportunity pass you when you were a teenager, I'm telling you, it's not too late. It's not too late. Hey, you 50-year-old, you can start right now. Hey, you 70-year-old, you can make an impact on the world for Jesus. Guess when? Right now. Right now. You can make an impact in the world. Hey, you 30-year-old, God can work through you. You can let God work through you to change the culture of America. The stuff we're going to talk about today applies to adults too, guys, young and old, everybody. God works in teenagers, but he also works through 80-year-olds in the Bible. It's incredible. There's no age restriction and there's no age requirement to letting God use you. The overall point is, though, teenagers don't have to wait until they're older. They don't have to wait till they're older to do these things. They can and they should start right now. And if they do, they won't regret it. If you do, teenager, if you do start right now, if you do start letting God into your life and letting God lead you right now, then you won't regret it. In fact, I truly believe that you'll be amazed by what God will do in your life as you become older, as you become stronger and more courageous men and women of faith, men and women of God. Before we go any further, because we're going to get into the Word and we're going to talk about Paul and Timothy, like I said. But before we go any further, I just feel like I need to set the record straight about teenagers. Teenagers, y'all, they're not all the same. In other words, we can't slap a label on an entire generation. I think we're guilty of that if we're being honest, especially lately. So, in other words, if one teenager does something dumb, that does not make the entire generation dumb, right? If one teenager does something irresponsible, that does not make the entire generation irresponsible. If one teenager does something, that doesn't mean that all teenagers are guilty of it. We can't slap a label on an entire generation of students. And this generation, by the way, it's not doomed. It's not a generation of failures. I know a lot of older folks truly believe that teenagers in general, this next generation in general, is dumb. They don't listen, they don't respect authority, they don't think before they act, and they're not responsible. This may be true for some, but it's definitely not true for all. We cannot slap a label on an entire generation. Now, this was true for me. I was definitely a stupid kid, and it's kind of funny. I was like, I want to make the point to them that I was one of those dumb kids, and so I started thinking about what are the stories I can tell them. What are the stories I can tell them to make this point? And the problem was I thought of way too many. I had way too many to choose from. But after a while, I kind of narrowed it down to two stories. I want to tell you two stories to make this point. The first story, I'm from South Georgia. Go Dogs, right? and I lived right by the salt water and right by the railroad tracks. And one of my friends and I's favorite place to hang out was we walked down the railroad tracks, and it would open up to this big trestle over the saltwater channel. And man, it was awesome. And basically, it was just a bridge that was over water, but it was pretty high up. And every time we'd hang out there, we'd always say, "Man, it'd be awesome to jump off this bridge," just to say that we did it, you know what I mean? And no other reason, just to say that we did it. And we always chickened out. We never had the courage to do it. But one day, I don't know what was different. I don't know if we had just watched Die Hard or something, but we were on fire. And so we got down to our hangout spot, and we got there, and we're jumping off today. Today is the day. And so my friend Kelly and I, me and him are both standing on the tracks, looking over the water. We probably stood there for a good 30 minutes or so, just kind of staring at the water, staring at each other, staring at the water, staring at each other, like who's gonna jump first? And eventually I just got tired of it, y'all, and I just jumped right over. And the reason that we were too scared to jump before is because we never knew if it was high tide or low tide, and we kind of just guesstimated that it was high enough to jump in at this time. And so I jumped in, and it sure enough wasn't high tide. I went straight down to the bottom. I landed on an oyster bed and cut my foot wide open. And I was coming up out of the water to tell my friend, "Hey, don't jump." But Kelly was just waiting to see if I survived. And he, as soon as I popped up out of the water, he's like, "Okay, he's alive. Must be good." So he jumped in, and luckily he didn't get hurt. He didn't land on anything, but I did. I did. And then the other story was I just got my license. And I'd saved up and I got my first truck. This is a Mitsubishi Mighty Max. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Mitsubishi Mighty Max is basically a Coke can with wheels, okay? I literally have owned Tonka trucks that were bigger than this truck, but I loved it to death. Because it was mine. You know, it was my first truck. Y'all know what I'm talking about? And I had the truck for about 4 days, my license for about 4 days. And I told my friend Kelly that, hey man, let's go for a little joyride, let's go for a little cruise. And so I swing by his house and I pick him up, and we get about a mile from where we live at this intersection. And it's an intersection I've been to a million times. It's a small town in Georgia, not many people. And so I'm like, man, I don't need to look and see who's coming this way. I don't need to look and see who's coming that way. I'm just gonna bolt through the intersection, right? That's how I'm telling you. And so I bolted right through there, and all I remember is Kelly looking at me and screaming and saying, "What are you doing, dummy? There's a car coming." And my friend Kelly took the brunt of an F-250 to his face, basically. And we were in the hospital for a while, but it was pretty crazy. We saw like Facebook posts that said, "Rest in peace, Brandon McKenzie." Everybody thought it was bad. But we got out the hospital, and he's fine now. I mean, he complains about his hip like what a big baby. He complained about his hip. Needs to man up. But other than that, though, we're completely fine. But all this to say, I did a lot of stupid things. I was stupid, but that doesn't mean that all teenagers do, because look at Kelly. Look at Kelly in both of these stories. Look at Kelly standing on the bridge. Now, he was smart enough, he was responsible enough to wait to see if I survived jumping. He wasn't going to jump first because he's smart. He said, I'm going to wait for my dumb friend to jump off the bridge and see if he survives first, and then I'll jump in. Look at Kelly. Kelly was younger than me. He didn't even have his license. He wasn't even driving, but he looked both ways before we crossed the intersection. We can't lump an entire generation together. We can't slap a label on an entire generation just because there are irresponsible people in this younger generation. That doesn't mean we can lump them all together. I mean, there are a lot of adults, y'all, that make decisions that are more stupider, I don't know what the word is, than the ones I made even as a teenager. There are a lot of irresponsible grown adults, right? But does that mean that all adults are irresponsible? Of course not. Of course not. That'd be silly. That'd be silly to believe. Now, when you see a teenager do something like that, you can't be like, "Oh, kids these days, you know, they're reckless, irresponsible, or whatever." You can say, "Hey, that's one stupid kid right there," but you can't say, "Hey, that the whole generation is doomed." We can't do that. We can't lump them all. We can't lump them all together. We can't. I know adults or older people, church leaders, whatever, looking down on a younger generation. It's not a new sin. It's not a new sin. This kind of discouraging and damaging behavior from older people has been around for a really, really long time. And maybe it's a trait that's just been passed down. Like maybe they got spoken to that way by their older generation, and so on and so on and so on. And it's become like this cycle. Well, I'm encouraging us this morning to do is to break that cycle. Break the cycle. So teenagers, listen to me when I tell you that your generation is under attack, but this is not a new problem. It's not a new problem. This is a problem a young man in the Bible, back in Bible times, faced, a young man named Timothy. Timothy was the young apprentice of the Apostle Paul, or he was the young Padawan, if you will, of Paul. And there's a lot we can learn. There's a lot we can learn from the relationship between Paul and Timothy. But I first want to look at when Paul meets Timothy. And this is, I think we have the slide. This is the book of Acts, chapter 16, 1 through 5. It says, Paul came to Derbe and then to Lystra, where a disciple named Timothy lived, whose mother was Jewish and a believer, but whose father was a Greek. The believers at Lystra and Iconium spoke well of him. Paul wanted to take him along on the journey, so he circumcised him because of the Jews who lived in that area, for they all knew that his father was a Greek. As they traveled from town to town, they delivered the decisions reached by the apostles and elders in Jerusalem for the people to obey. And listen to this. So the churches were strengthened in faith, and they grew daily in numbers. So let's break this down a little bit. Paul's doing some missionary work. He's traveling. He comes to this town and he hears about this kid who's just on fire for Jesus. This kid whose love for Jesus is not only known in one town, but we see it's known in two towns. Like he's known for his fire for Jesus. And Paul's like, man, I want to meet this kid. And he does, and he sees something in Timothy, and he says to Timothy, hey, Timothy, I want to take you on a missionary journey. I think you'd be awesome at that. I want to take you on a missionary journey with me. But here's the thing, though, Tim. The place we're going to, they're still really caught up on the old law, and they think you have to be circumcised. And they're not going to take anyone seriously unless they're circumcised. So we got to do some surgery on you, Timothy. And Timothy, I'm sure there's this long, awkward pause like, wait, what did you just say I have to do if I want to go on this missionary trip? And Paul's like, yeah, you heard me. And I'm sure there was this pause, but eventually Timothy's like, okay, yeah, because he's on fire for God. He didn't have to be circumcised. There was no law that required him to be circumcised anymore. He didn't have to be circumcised. He had a right not to be. He had the freedom not to be, but he chose to be in order to reach people for Jesus. And that made me think, like, what kind of sacrifices would we make in order to reach people? What kind of sacrifices would we make? I mean, we have rights as Christians, right? We have rights to drink. We can't get drunk, right? That's obviously sinful, but we have a right to drink. We have a right to talk how we want. There's no verse that says, thou shalt not drop the F-bomb. I mean, it's not there, right? We have a right, and we have lines that are drawn. We have lines that are drawn. Okay, here's the line, and this is sin. Don't cross this line. And you have the right, as a Christian, by the way, to get all the way to that line. But what rights, what freedoms would you give up in order to reach people who wouldn't take you seriously if you were inching your way to that line? Timothy got it. He got how important it was to share the gospel. He got it, and we got to get it too. And then look what happens once Timothy makes that decision. It says, I love this part. It says, so the churches were strengthened in the faith, and they grew daily in numbers. Why? Because of a teenager who got what it meant to follow Jesus. Notice that Paul doesn't tell Timothy, hey, Timothy, wait until you're older. Just wait until you're on fire for Jesus. You're doing awesome things right now, but let's wait till you're a little bit older. Then I'll take you on a missionary trip, right? Paul doesn't do that. We don't see that. He does it. Timothy was probably a boy or a teenager when Paul meets him, and Paul says, I want you to start following Jesus. I want you to start serving Christ. I want you to start changing culture. I want you to start changing the world right now. And Timothy is on fire for Jesus. He even got circumcised. Like I said, did he have to? Of course not. He didn't have to. But he did it for the sake of reaching people. He did it for the sake of strengthening the church, right? He got it. He got what it meant to follow Jesus. And if Timothy can do that, teenagers, then what will you do? Can you at least try to resist temptation? Can you at least risk a few friendships? Can you at least risk some popularity? Can you at least put that on the line? God wants to use you. Everyone in here, but especially the teenagers. God wants to use you. He wants to use you right now, just like he used Timothy right away as a teenager. But you have to let God use you. God has chosen you. You are chosen youth, but you have to choose God. God has chosen you, but you have to choose God. He's waiting on you. Paul saw something. He saw something in Timothy. He saw something, and he decided to invest in him. He decided to pour into him. And if you're an older man in this room, here's what I want to encourage you to do. I want to encourage you to find a young man to invest in. And if you're an older woman, find a young girl to invest in. It won't always be easy, right? They'll fail, they'll stumble, right? Like we all do, but show them grace, show them love. If you're older, always be looking for someone younger to invest in. Always be looking for a Timothy. And when your Timothy is grown and you feel like, hey, my Timothy is ready to become their own Paul, and they can go find their own Timothy, then find a new Timothy. That's what I believe. That's what Jesus meant when he said to go out and to make disciples. I believe that's what it means to make disciples. I believe that's what we're all called to do. And if you're a teenager, find yourself a Paul. Or even if you're new to the faith, if you're a baby Christian, so to speak, and you don't know much about God or the Bible, you don't really know much about any, you kind of just new. You're new. You don't have to be a teenager, but you're just new to the faith. Find you a Paul. Find you Paul. Find yourself someone who can pour into you. Find yourself someone who can kind of train you up, who can equip you. And if you can't think of anybody, ask me or anybody else on staff. We'd love to plug you in with somebody. We'd love to get you plugged in with your Paul. We'd even find you a Timothy if you want. I mean, that's what we're called to do, guys. That's what it means to make disciples. Every Christian needs a Paul, and every Christian needs a Timothy. As Timothy's story goes on, we see that Paul continues to invest in Timothy. Paul continues to pour into Timothy. He continues to empower Timothy. We see that Paul trusts Timothy. We see that Paul believes in Timothy. And most importantly, we see that Paul never gives up on Timothy. Was Timothy perfect? No, of course not, right? I'm sure there were plenty of times that Timothy messed up, that he failed. But we never see Paul give up on him. You know, I don't know if this is a true story or not. I'm pretty sure it's an urban legend or whatever. But there's a story about Thomas Edison and how he made his light bulb, and he spent days making this light bulb, blood, sweat, and tears poured into making this light bulb. And when he's done, he's finally done. Him and his team are done working on it. There's this young boy in his shop, and he says to the boy, "Okay, I want you to take this light bulb upstairs, and I want you to put it safe in the cabinet." And so I'm sure the boy knew, he understood how important the light bulb was and how much work went into making it. And so he probably holds it really carefully, taking one step at a time as he goes up. And then Thomas Edison sitting back on his couch. Whew, finally, man, that took so long. I'm so glad that's over. And right about then he hears, psh, little boy dropped the light bulb. So Thomas Edison gets back to work. Creates a new light bulb. Days and days of blood, sweat, and tears, right? And then when he's done, he's like, all right, you sit down. I got the light bulb. I'm bringing it upstairs. You're not touching this light bulb again. No, that's what I do. That's not what he does. He hands the light bulb back to the same little boy, tells him to bring it upstairs. Y'all, I'm sure there are plenty of times that Timothy drop the light bulb, so to speak. And there'll be plenty of times that the younger person that you're pouring into, or the person that you're pouring into, drops the light bulb. But do what Paul did. Keep handing the light bulb back. Keep handing the light bulb back. Don't be the kind of adult who yells about broken light bulbs. Don't be the kind of adult who yells about spilled drinks. Don't be a spilled drink, broken light bulb adult, okay? When a youth messes up, show them grace. Show them love. Show them that you still trust them, that you still want to empower them. You still want to make a leader out of them. That is the only way the future of the church will be secure. That is the only way Christianity in this nation and in this world will be secure, is if we keep pouring into the next generation. That's what Jesus has called us to do, to keep his church alive. He's entrusted us. And as Timothy gets older, Paul shows just how much he trusts Timothy. See, Paul plants this church in one of the most secular towns imaginable, Ephesus. As in Ephesus, as the letter of Ephesians, that church. He plants a church there, and this is a really secular town. It's not Christian by any means. Like imagine San Francisco or New York City or something. Paul plants a church there, and who does Paul ask to be one of the leaders there, to be one of the pastors there? Young Timothy. That's how much he trusts him. We have 2 books of the Bible that are named after Timothy, and usually when a book of the Bible is named after somebody, it means that person wrote the book, but not always, and that's not the case with Timothy. The books of Timothy are actually letters written by Paul to Timothy. See, even after Timothy goes off and does his own thing and becomes his own Paul still continues to pour into him, and he writes these 2 letters of encouragement to Timothy, 1st and 2nd Timothy. Timothy is trying to pastor this big church in this huge secular city, and of course he has struggles, of course he has questions, of course he has concerns. So Paul writes to him to encourage him and to help him. And the 2 books of Timothy, by the way, are like how-to books for church leaders. Like they're just gold. We need them. Whoever's going to get the lights can get the lights, and whoever's going to come play. Paul gives Timothy a lot of great advice in these 2 books that we have. Everything in these 2 books is so important, but I want to focus on one verse in particular out of these 2 books. This verse should change your thinking when it comes to the next generation. It should change how you look at the younger generation. It should change how you treat the younger generation. It should change your life. One of our small group leaders told me this week that this verse that we're about to read is actually the verse that inspired her to get involved with student ministry. So it's a powerful verse, and it should change our life. This verse is the verse that we model our youth group around, and we constantly remind our youth about. This verse is 1 Timothy 4:12. We can pull it up on the screen. It says, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young. But listen to this next part. But set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. What does that mean? Hey, teenagers, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young. Instead, here's what you do. Here's what you're called to do right now, right where you are as a teenager. Here's what you have the potential to do right now, right where you are. Here's what God is calling you to do right now, right where you are. Right where you are as a teenager, you can be an example for who? The adult believers, for the church. You can set the bar. You can show them what it means to follow Jesus. You have that potential. God is calling you to do that. You don't have to wait until you're older. How awesome is that? How awesome is that? You can be a leader for adults. You can teach people what it means to follow Jesus. Don't let anyone tell you that you're too young and not capable or unqualified to do that. And for you older folks, I'm telling you, don't you dare look down on somebody because they're young. It's wrong. It's sinful. It's like spiritual coffee, guys. It stunts the spiritual growth of this generation. It hinders this generation. It limits them. Puts chains on them. So teenagers, adults, kids, senior citizens, no matter what people tell you, everyone, remember that you are chosen by God. God has a plan laid out just for you. A plan that will bring you true fulfillment. I don't know about you guys, but I love some fulfillment. It'll bring you true purpose. I love having purpose. It'll bring you real joy. I love having joy. But the question is, are you going to accept that calling? Are you going to accept that plan that God has for you? You're going to follow God's plan for your life. We know Michaela and I have this dog, and he's a good dog, but he's just super annoying. Like, he follows us everywhere we go. He's always right behind our feet. And when Michaela and I will split, like, we'll go to different rooms, like, he'll stand between us like, which way do I go? He can't decide. I think that's where a lot of us are, right? We're looking at the world's plan for our life, and we're looking at God's plan for our life, and we're like, which way? This way feels good for a little while, but I know it's going to lead me to destruction. This way can be hard, but it's going to bring me true fulfillment, true purpose, true joy, true peace. We don't know this for sure. It's not biblical truth, but historical documents tell us that Timothy lived till he was about 80, and he died around 80 years old, and not of old age like you would think, but actually by being beaten and stoned to death at 80 years old. These documents tell us that there was a procession, a parade coming through Timothy's town, and it was a parade honoring a false god. And Timothy, he just got sick of it. He got sick of people following the world's plan for their life. He got sick of people being led to destruction. He got sick of people worshiping other gods, fake gods, instead of the real God. He got sick of people rejecting God and turning to these idols. So history tells us that he runs out into the middle of this parade and he starts preaching the gospel. He tries to tell people about the true God. And what happens is people get mad. And they drag him away, they start beating him, and they stone him to death because of it. Timothy died trying to change culture. That's how passionate he was about it. That's how much he understood how important it was to follow Jesus. Now, this isn't me telling you it's okay to go run out and scream at people about God in the middle of a gay pride parade or a march for abortion. That just wouldn't work. It wouldn't work today. That's not what would work. But there are other things that we're called to do to show the love of Jesus. There are other hard things that we're called to do as a Jesus follower in order to change culture and in order to point more people to Jesus. So my question is, what is it worth to you? What's it worth to you? To Timothy, it was worth getting circumcised as a teenager. That's a lot right there in general, right? But it was also worth his life. It was worth pastoring a church in a harsh secular environment, which, wow, I can't even imagine. And then it was worth being stoned to death. Stoned to death. God has chosen you. He's chosen you, but you have got to choose him. He's chosen you, but you've got to choose him. Christians need to choose to do the hard things, but they do it because of the purpose and the fulfillment of life, and they know it's worth it. They do it because the fruit of the Spirit is worth it. They do it because getting to heaven one day is worth it, right? And spending eternity with God is worth it, but they also do it because getting to heaven and seeing people that are in heaven and not hell because of you is worth it. Timothy knew that. He got that, and I hope you do too. Hope you do too. God changed the culture, and he ultimately changed the world through a teenager like Timothy. And he wants to do the same thing. He wants to do the same thing. He's got a plan in place for every single one of you. He's chosen every single one of you to do the exact same thing, no matter how old you are. He wants to do the same thing for you. He's just waiting on you. God's chosen you. You got to choose God. Let's pray. Father, I just thank you for everything you're doing in Revolution Church. Wow. You never cease to amaze me. You never cease to blow my mind with the things that you do in this church, and especially in the student ministry. You are so clearly at work. And Father, I just ask that you would open up everyone's eyes to see that. Open up everyone's eyes to see that they're chosen by you to do incredible things. But especially the teenagers in here, especially the youth in here, especially the younger generations, I pray that you would open up their eyes to see that they are chosen by you, by God, to do incredible, mind-blowing, awesome, amazing, fulfilling things with their life for you. And give them the courage to do that and give them the strength to do that, because it's going to be hard. It's going to be scary sometimes. So give them the courage and give them the strength to do that. Give them the courage and give them the strength to keep their focus on you and to remember that they are chosen by God. We just pray that you continue working, continue doing amazing things in our church and in our student ministry, Father. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Everybody said, awesome.
We are so glad that you've joined us online today and checked out Revolution Church. You can find us on Facebook and actually go like our page if you want to keep up with the church, or you can join our text club. Text RevChurch to 62582. If you have questions, if you'd like to talk to someone, if you have prayer requests, just email us at office@crossvillerevolution.com, or you can call our church at 931-248-6441. Thank you so much.